Their finest hour. =RK=. Part 1. Security Center. GAR HQ. Coruscant. Colonel Zack was staring at multiple screens showing the same thing in stunned disbelief. One moment everything was quiet, then all landlines were suddenly down and the HQ was put under jamming field. Sound the alert. Security team to defense positions. I want to know who is attacking us. The clone snapped out of it and ordered. Check the internal feeds. I want to know the moment we've got a breach. I want someone getting out of the building and sounding the alarm. More than a dozen clones sitting at various consoles began typing frantically, while Zack began looking over the right wall which was covered with screens showing camera feeds. Everything appears quiet, sir. One of the techs muttered. Hey, check the ops room, another exclaimed. Put it on the main screen, Zack snapped. A group of soldiers in what appeared to be modified phase armor were at the entrance and pointing blasters at the clones stationed there. Security teams to the operation room, on the double, Zack snapped. Where did those bastards come from? The colonel frowned, then he snarled. That Jedi Hutt spawned. He switched in Mandalorian for some juicy curses. I want everyone who came in with Teen located and security dispatched to arrest them. Lethal force is authorized. Burn through the jamming. We need to sound the alert, Zack spat. I bet we aren't the only ones hit. The clone paused. Zack remembered a weird message that Scarter sent him a few weeks ago. I want 2 security teams to get to the hangar and break out no matter who attempts to stop them. One is going to the closest GAR base, apprises them of the situation and sends QRFs here, at the Senate and to reinforce our people at the temple. The other is going to the Mandalorian embassy. Tell their chief of security Nightfall, they know what that means. The colonel trailed off. The closest security team made it to the corridor in front of operation and were immediately engaged. The 2 brothers at the door were gunned down, then a firefight exploded withing the HQ's nerve center too. Have more security sent to operations, medics too, they'll need them. Zack growled. =RK=. EU Warfare Center. Only frigate Shadow of Intent. High orbit above Coruscant. Data links are up. We've got good connection. Sending verification codes. We're patched into the system. We're receiving confirmation from our agents. Broadsword is green. Reaper is green. Do we have a go, Mom? Agent Kelly Garnes asked the hollow image of her director. Proceed. I'll be in position in time. Good luck, Agent. The director's electronic ghost vanished. You heard the boss lady. We're a go. Kelly ordered. She brushed a hand through her short black hair and cursed quietly. To think it came to this. One of the specialists muttered. What did you expect? That we would stand by and let the Sith ruin the whole Republic just like they did with my world? A short woman sneered. What happened to Tarsis was a tragedy, but it was done thousands of years ago. He began. The Senate put in charge of the GAR one of the Sith who criffed up the restoration effort and ensured that even today my homeworld is still a monster-infested hell. The woman snapped back. We've all agreed that the Sith can't be allowed to gain more control over the Republic, no matter the price. That's why we're here. Kelly spoke quietly, yet conviction rang with every word. We all know what would happen if they're not stopped. Our worlds still bear the scars from the last time. We stop them now. Carry out your orders. Command channels are infiltrated. Reaper has green light. I'm sending the orders. An agent who had been content to simply listen, announced. Good. Kelly nodded. May the ancestors forgive us, she whispered so quietly no one heard her. =RK=. Reaper flight. High orbit above Coruscant. Damn the Jedi and the Hutt they crawled from. Captain Vigo snarled when he got the order to execute his mission. He was leading a Y-Wing squadron on a training flight that accidentally would bring them close to the Coruscant Defense Fleet's flagship. A cruiser that only apparently suspected of being suborned by Jedi who might be trying to pull a coup today. When he had been given the orders a few hours ago and got an explanation what might be happening planet-side if only Unsib criffed up an operation aimed at traitors among the Jedi, Vigo found it hard to believe. Surely even the Jedi wouldn't be that crazy, right? Then he remembered Skywalker's stunt and other horror stories he had heard from buddies stationed at the front lines. To think that the Jedi would be insane enough to attempt a coup and even worse have some support among the fleet and his brothers. Vigo snarled. It had to be that crazy space magic of theirs. The Force. There was no other way some of his brothers would follow the madman. Damn those honorless bastards to hell. Vigo swore. Reaper light, we just got green light. Follow me in. For our brothers. The clone increased the speed of his fighter and slightly changed course. It wasn't quite an attack vector aimed at the flagship, though it was close. Reaper flight, Republic actual, you're getting pretty close. Did you get lost? Over. A painfully familiar voice, the same as Vigo's own, sounded from the captain's comm. He looked up from his instruments. The Republic, flagship of the Coruscant Defense Fleet, was already clearly visible. Republic actual, Reaper 1. We're on a training flight. Just enjoying the view, over. Vigo switched back to the squadron's frequency. Keep it steady. We're almost there. Reaper 1, Republic actual, the clone on the comms sounded amused. You should buy us a drink first before ogling us from this close. Go. Vigo ordered and hit the afterburner. The captain put his Y-wing into a steep dive towards the Republic and activated the targeting systems of his bomber. Another flick of a button and the weapons were online too, the whole load worth of iron bombs. Reaper 1, break off. Republic actual exclaimed. Sorry, brother. I hope you make it thorough all right. Vigo answered. Their target began lighting up targeting sensors. Any moment now the Guardian would be coming online. The captain smiled sadly. The Republic wasn't going to make it in time. He got a good targeting tone and pressed the trigger. Glowing azure orbs detached from their hard points and flew at the cruiser. Vigo continued to fly above the target until his weapons were spent, then broke off. He banked left and looked down through the canopy. The Republic was listing while big forks of ionic energy racked her superstructure and made sure she was knocked off. Vigo's comm beeped as he received a fleet-wide priority message. He switched channels to listen while making his best to get out of the Republic's squadron range before they got over the shock and began shooting. This is Director Yvonne Fell, from ONI. Coruscant Defense Fleet, you're ordered to stand down. A Jedi coup is in progress on the surface. Multiple GAR ground and naval units have been compromised. As we speak, ONI and SIB units are conducting operations to apprehend the traitors. Until your loyalty to the Republic can be made certain, you're to stand down. Keep your weapons and shields off. Any aggressive move will be considered a clear and present danger to Coruscant and her people, thus dealt with accordingly. I repeat. Some ships simply remained frozen in their positions. Others either received conflicting orders if their captains had no intention to stand by while a potential coup was going off on the world below them. Within minutes, elements of the Coruscant Defense Fleet, the orbital defenses and an ONI squadron that just exited hyperspace began shooting at each other. Some of the ONI ships launched assault shuttles that ignored the fight in orbit and accelerated towards Coruscant. =RK=. Part 2. Zash's Lab. Republic R&D Complex. Coruscant. Come on, Master Yoda. I really need to put this body through its paces. Zash waved cheerfully with her artificial arm. Those words stopped the Jedi in his tracks and he looked at the Sith with wide, horrified eyes. She saw the understanding in his gaze and laughed. Yes, it's been a long time since I got a Jedi to run around in. Zash beamed. Yoda's features hardened. He leaned forward and his fingers closed around the hilt of his lightsaber in a death grip. Such a blind fool I was, Yoda whispered and glared at the Sith. End you today I will, Sith. Come on. Zash bid him to approach. Come and try. She smirked. Judge your crimes the Force will, Yoda declared. One moment the Jedi Master was meters away, then in the next he was little more than a green blur rocketing straight at Zash. The Sith's delighted laughter ran throughout the lab and she went to meet him. Purple lighting whipped from Zash's blood and flesh hand and struck the Jedi mid-flight. He bounced from it and touched the ground for a mere heartbeat before jumping at the woman. Yoda's lightsaber moved like a buzzsaw ready to render the Sith limb from limb. That's it. Come on, you can do better, Zash continued to laugh. She parried a lightning fast slash, leaned away from another and her prosthetic snapped forward to tear a chunk of Yoda's robe. The Jedi barely avoided losing a bit of flesh, before he was caught by a pulse of creeping darkness that made him jump away. He landed 5 meters from the Sith and threw away his overrobe. Yoda's eyes narrowed and for a moment he literally glowed as he channeled as much of the Force he could. The dark side energy clinging to his body slithered away and he took a deep, relieved breath. That's not all you can do, right?
Zash frowned.
Right? We're going to have so much fun.
Powerful you are, Yoda admitted. The Jedi raised a hand and concentrated. All the lab station around the large room shook before they were torn away from the floor. Pieces of equipment began floating around them like asteroid rings orbiting a planet. Yoda's hand slashed down and every single piece of equipment and furniture in the lab shot at Zash.
Bravo! The Sith exclaimed and graced the Jedi with a huge grin.
Zash smirked and everything flying at her froze in the air. She pointed an artificial finger at Yoda. My turn. The Sith crooned. Tendrils made of purple energy exploded from her body and began striking the floating furniture, then jumping from piece to piece until Zash stood in the middle of lighting web. She began humming happily to herself and jabbed a finger at Yoda. Following her command, every single piece floating around the Sith hurled itself at the Jedi. Yoda let his weapon go and raised both hands up with the palms open and pointing at the incoming barrage. The pieces began slowing down and crashing in each other, with every collision sending sparks flying everywhere. Triumph you shall not, Sith. Allow it I shall not, Yoda declared and pushed everything back at Zash. That's better. She clapped her hands, sending the furniture and equipment at the walls, floor and ceiling with enough force that everything shattered to pieces. The dark side energy discharged harmlessly away, only making the room appear cloaked in shadows for a few seconds, before the still intact ceiling lights could chase away the brief twilight. You know, it's been a long time since I had someone of your kind to play with. Being able to naturally live for centuries even without being touched by the Force. Zash spoke in a relevant tone. Do you mind if I keep you as a lab buddy? You know, to experiment on and have a proper conversation with? Zash beamed at the Jedi. Decline I must. Too busy being dead you will be. Yoda grumbled. Not by your hand, Zash laughed cheerfully. The Sith pointed her lightsaber at the Jedi. 6 spears made of light devouring darkness formed in a circle around her weapon. I say jump. The lances shot at Yoda one after another. He sidestepped one, dove under a second, then rolled to avoid the third. The next 3 came in a quick succession, forcing him to jump away. The next attack came in immediately and Yoda had to concentrate all his attention on catching and absorbing the continuous lightning bolt that Zash sent at him. For long seconds, the Jedi Master was suspended in midair, holding on the dark side attack. Even as he absorbed as much as he could, the lighting increased in magnitude. It made his palms sweat, then they began to tingle and smoke as the moisture began evaporating. The attack cut off, letting Yoda land on the floor. He swayed on his feet and panted for breath. The energy he had to absorb was more than his small frame could handle. He felt the strain. It was like the lighting had actually racked him and set his nerves on fire. Not impressive, though not bad either. You can use some tutoring, I reckon. Zash frowned. You're the Jedi Grand Master, not his ugly little sidekick, right? The frown marring her face deepened. Whatever. Zash shrugged. She raised her artificial hand and all the debris in the room jumped to obey like pets eager for their master's touch. Her fingers closed into a fist and everything condensed into a ball above them. Lesson number 1. Please pay attention. Zash ordered. Metal, crystal and glass shattered into a fine dust. The lab began smelling of ozone before it grew darker. Yoda's eyes widened and he jumped back towards the entrance. Lighting exploded from the ceiling, struck the cloud of condensed dust and ignited it until within moments it was a ball of glowing plasma. Zash leveled her hand at Yoda and sent the small artificial sun flying unerringly at him. The Jedi Master used all the excess energy still running through his body to halt the incoming fiery death. The sphere halted in front of him and it took all his strength to throw it to the side so it flew past him when Zash pushed harder. The plasma slammed into the wall, splashed over it and the floor and began melting through them as it was cooling down. Yoda panted from the exertion. He knew he should be feeling the heat from the plasma, instead all he could sense upon his skin was the cold touch of the dark side. He felt sluggish. Exhausted. Good, my unwitting apprentice, Zash chuckled. You're actually a lot of fun, aren't you? Huh? What's this I'm sensing? Resignation? Don't tell me you came here to become a martyr or something. Zash scoffed. Ah, Jedi, you never change. The ancient woman huffed in exasperation. Determination you feel, Sith. Triumph you shall not. Yoda grumbled. Bah. As if I care about that. Zash waved dismissively. Give me a decent lab, resources, a few competent assistants. Minion 1, you most certainly don't count. Zash pointed at one of the cameras built into the ceiling that had survived so far. Where was I? As I said, I don't really care about the annual spat between the Jedi and Sith. If it wasn't for my apprentice being here to tease and you people being fun to watch stumble in the dark, I wouldn't be paying you any attention. Zash pointed an accusing finger at Yoda, who appeared to finally be catching his breath. Why did you come here to trash my lab anyway? It wasn't a half-bad attempt. Her frown deepened. It isn't just because I'm a Sith, right? That's dastardly discrimination. Bloody Jedi. Zash began walking towards Yoda, who used the Force to recall his lightsaber. The weapon had somehow survived the destruction of everything in the lab besides the Force adepts. Move away. I'm done playing with you, little Jedi. If you want lessons on how to properly use the Force or that tiny lightsaber of yours, call one of my assistants. I recommend Minion 2. She's showing the bare minimum of competence required to survive in a lab. We'll start with 1,000 credits an hour. That's a fair price, I think. Zash looked lost in thought. You shall not pass, Yoda declared. Huh, you still here? You're trespassing, you know. Hey, minions, where's security? We've got someone loitering in my lab. He trashed everything too, now that I think about it. Zash pointed at the Jedi Master. Before you receive any more lessons, you'll be paying for this. She waved at the empty lab and the melted wall. What madness is this? Yoda exclaimed. Madness? Zash narrowed her eyes dangerously. This was my lab, before you trashed it, you little ignorant troll. The Sith snapped. I demand an apology. Zash huffed. She put her hands on her feet and gave the Jedi an expectant look. Mad you are? Yoda muttered. Me? I was simply minding my business, not bothering anyone. You're the one who barged in, threatened me, attacked me and wrecked the place. Zash pointed out. No more lies, Sith, Yoda snapped. Zash smiled and sighed. She wondered how long he could hold out before his restraint was gone. Toying with self-righteous Jedi was so much fun. Lies? By little old me? Zash took a step back in mock horror. Yoda opened his mouth to speak and staggered. His eyes widened in horror. Oh, my. What did you people do now? Forgot your medicine or something? Zash grumbled. Couldn't you wait to get yourselves killed until the current unpleasantries are over? I swear, you Jedi have the worst timing. Yoda glared at the Sith. You're kind to blame as. Deceived us, Sidious did. What? Is that some kind of STD? Zash frowned. Yoda shook. More Jedi were dying, both at the Temple and Senate. Every lost soul sent stabs of pain through his heart. It created a void where the bonds with those people used to be. Every death made the galaxy that much darker, the light that much dimmer. Sith, mock us no longer. Is that anger I sense, Master Yoda? Zash batted her eyelashes at the Jedi and asked coyly. Yoda's ears drooped and he paused. Played us you did. The Jedi began talking slowly, thinking about what he was going to say. Set us up the trap you did and walked into it we did. I honestly have no idea what you're babbling about, Jedi. Can't you speak plain old basic? It's not hard, you know. Zash grumbled. Strengthening your control over the Republic you are, Sith. Stop you we will. Protect democracy we will. No new Sith Empire will rise, Yoda declared. This rings no bells, I'm afraid. If you can try saying it again. In basic. Zash spoke the last word slowly as if she was talking to a young child. Yoda felt a fellow Jedi Master die at the Senate. He closed his eyes briefly, gathered the Force around him and then looked up at Zash. His gaze shone with utter determination. Are you going to attack me again? With no provocation? See, I'm unarmed. Zash levitated her weapon from where she attached it to her belt until it laid on the floor between them. Her lips twitched into a mocking smile and she raised her hands to show them to the cameras. Foolish, blind old people we are. Yoda muttered. Hey. Speak about yourself. I'm neither a fool like your kind loves to make themselves into, nor blind, thank you very much. Zash grimaced. I don't look old, do I? If die we must, if hated we must be, so be it. Our duty we do. Until our last breath the Republic protect we will. The Jedi Master continued as if he didn't hear her. While a Jedi draws breath, Darkness triumph will not. Oppose you we will, Sith. So you're just an old-fashioned fanatic. Why didn't you say so from the start? We could have called some nice folks from the closest sanatorium. I hear they have some great pills to help you with your problems. Zash grinned. Or perhaps you just need to get laid. I hear that some Jedi get much more reasonable after that. Yes, that's it. Ashara certainly did become bearable after some wild sex. Zash grimaced again. I'm not sure who would like to sleep with you, but this is Coruscant. Have you tried the better brothels in the lower levels? I remember this nice place back during the sack. I got a lot of fun there while all the fools were running around shooting and stabbing each other. Zash trailed off. Was that enough to push the Jedi over the edge? His eyebrows, or well what passed from them, were twitching in sync already. Yoda sent her a malevolent glare that would make any self-respected Sith proud before shaking his head, crushing his anger, and jumped at her, with an ignited lightsaber in hand. I tend to ramble. Zash jumped back to avoid a slash. Is this a reason enough you want to stab me with that little lightsaber of yours? Shouldn't you take me on a dinner first, or at least buy me a drink? The Sith grinned at the Jedi Master. Utterly mad you are, Yoda declared with absolute conviction. Hey, you're the crazy chasing me around with a blade in hand. Zash protested indignantly and jumped over a low sweep aimed at her knees. I've got enough of that. This is no way to treat a lady. Yoda was spinning in the air and his blade went for Zash's throat. She stood her ground and glared at the Jedi, who froze in place, caught by an invisible grip. Lighting danced in a circle around them before jumping at the Jedi. It struck Yoda and he screamed within his intangible prison. For a moment he was hidden by arching tendrils of purple energy which formed a sphere around his tiny frame. It exploded outward like a grenade, forcing Zash to jump back. She instinctively raised a hand and formed a force barrier when a small ball of blazing light shot at her. A loud bang sounded and the Sith was thrown back, flying one way and her torn-off prosthetic spinning in a different direction. You'll pay for this, you little monster. Zash snarled and jumped to her feet. Her lightsaber, which laid forgotten on the ground, jumped in the air and ignited as if on its own will. The broken artificial arm did the same, however it was engulfed by crimson lighting that arched all over its surface. Zash pointed her hand at Yoda, who was on all four and still trying to recover. Blade and hand flew at him. The Jedi raised his arms and stopped the projectiles a moment before they pierced his flesh. Then Yoda's own lightsaber flew up from where it had fallen, ignited and tried to take off his head. The Jedi grimaced at the weapon and the blade froze just before it seared away his eyes. I will put you down like the mad dog you are, Zash growled. A sound of distant thunder sounded in the lab. Yoda found himself in the middle of a dark circle and he had just a moment to feel afraid before lighting descended from the ceiling and began licking at the Jedi. For a moment nothing seemed to happen. Yoda absorbed the first few strikes, then he started screaming. The Jedi's defense faltered. The prosthetic arm escaped his grip and flew straight at his head. The Jedi managed to twist without killing himself on his own blade, yet he didn't escape unscratched. Lighting clawed fingers racked the side of his head and tore away his left eye along with a piece of his scalp. More lighting bolts struck home and Yoda howled in pain. His lightsaber hit was next. Purple energy descended from the ceiling and fried it up, making it blow up near the Jedi. He stumbled back and screamed again when he lost the tenuous hold he had on Zash's weapon. The crimson lightsaber tore away free and took his right hand at the shoulder. A choked groan escaped Yoda, before a massive lighting fell from the ceiling and slammed him in the floor with bone-breaker force. The localized storm subdued and Zash strode forward. Are you happy now, Jedi? You came here looking for a fight. Are you glad that you got what you wanted? Zash shook her head and schooled her expression to be one of sad resignation. The Sith walked next to the Jedi's smoking body and knelt to take a better look. Sensing that he was just alive, Zash smiled and whispered quiet enough that the sole remaining camera's microphone wouldn't catch her words. Do you know how hilarious it is to watch you Jedi dig your own graves? To see you've put yourselves in a position with no way out but death? Zash chuckled quietly. I should thank you, Master Yoda. Thanks to you, I've got the privilege to see not only the Republic but the Jedi fall a second time. Even if I don't particularly care about our ancient conflict, I appreciate the opportunity you gave me. Yoda opened one bleary eye. This was probably the only truth that infernal woman uttered since Vale brought her to Coruscant. His lips twitched as he tried to speak. Zash leaned closer. We
Oath. Low.
S-E.
Yoda croaked.
Zash's eyes widened. She attempted to jump back, however Yoda kept her in place with an Durasteel telekinetic grip. He flooded himself with the Force, pulling more energy than his saturated, dying body could handle. It was a forbidden technique, one meant for a Force adept that knew he was facing a superior opponent they could not best. Yoda screamed as the energy he was pulling inside his body reached a critical point and he began burning. His last conscious thought was used to hurl himself at the Sith. There was only light, which Yoda's dying mind embraced. The Jedi's body hit Zash resembling nothing more than a ball of liquid fire and splashed over her before it detonated with a strength not quite as much as a thermal detonator. Their finest hour. =RK=. Part 3. Gar HQ. Coruscant. When everything went to hell, Anakin was stuck in the lower levels of the HQ, fighting training droids. At least it was much more fun than the other training and studying Obi-Wan had him doing these days. Those usually left him bored and frustrated. After the alarm's shrill screams began stabbing in Skywalker's head, he was exhilarated by the chance of real actions. That was before the common-sense Kenobi has been attempt to nurture in him kicked in and he swore. An alert going in the HQ spelled bad things happening all around. Anakin jumped off the training ring and went to the only other flesh and blood occupant of the room. "What's happening?" the Jedi shouted. The clone sat up as his minder tilted his head listening to the comm in his helmet. "There's an attack ongoing. Multiple enemy units in the building." The clone glared at Skywalker. "They're led by a Jedi." He raised his blaster and pointed it at Anakin. "What?" Anakin exclaimed. "This had to be some kind of mistake, right?" "Stand down, Skywalker. General Teen and men he brought in are busy shooting the ops center. You will stand right here and wait for a security team to arrive and escort you to the nearest cell. Otherwise you'll be considered hostile." Anakin was lost for words. "What about Obi-Wan?" he asked. The clone's featureless helmet stared back. "The general is engaging Teen," he finally said. "We need to help him," Anakin said. "You'll be staying right here where I can see you." Skywalker stared at the clone, opened his mouth to say protest, then thought better of it and closed it. The Krif was happening? =RK=. Mandalorian Embassy. Coruscant. What do you mean you can't establish connection with the Senate? Satine glared at the comm unit on her desk. "Did you hit it many times?" Bo-Katan needled her sister. "Very funny," Satine sighed and pressed a few buttons. "That's weird." She frowned and began fiddling with the comm. "Perhaps Sony is messing up again and jamming half the hemisphere as they did 2 weeks ago during that equipment test," Bo muttered. "That was quite the scandal. They should know better after that circus." Satine shook her head. "The Senate's making noises about inquiries, investigations or even the next year's budget." "I'll believe it when I see it." Bo shrugged. "When are you going to tell Obi-Wan the good news?" she asked and looked pointedly at her sister's belly. "Tonight, unless he's cooped up at work due to another emergency." A pleased smile appeared on Satine's face. "He better be appropriately happy." Bo smiled. "Though I bet he'll be left speechless and wondering how it happened." "Hey, Obi-Wan isn't like that," Satine protested. "Keep telling yourself that, sister. One of these days it might even be true." "Why am I keeping you around anyway?" Satine grumbled. "I'm your favorite sister?" Bo tried. "Only sister. Calling you my favorite one anyway would be a stretch." Satine smiled sweetly. "Nice to see you still have some of your snark." Bo smiled too. The comm beeping interrupted their banter. "Ambassador, you've got a call from a Republic soldier. He's saying it's an emergency and has a message." "Nightfall," Satine's assistant explained after she accepted the call. "Get him on the line, now," Satine snapped and stood up. "Jedi. Can't they for once not criff everything up for us?" Bo grumbled. She activated her comm and sent the codes which would put the building on high alert and send every warrior on the grounds to the armories. Seconds later, the soldier was put on and he tersely explained about the attack on Gar HQ, the jamming and cut ground lines. The sisters looked at each other with worry. "This is a planned strike," Bo pointed out. "Taking out command and control, either neutralizing or eliminating QRFs." "The Senate," Satine exclaimed. "They will need to arrest the Chancellor, won't they?" Bo agreed. They apparently have allies too. She frowned at the thought. Your husband is a big boy, he should be all right, Bo continued. We need to go keep the government in one piece until the army gets its stuff together and comes to clean up this mess. Satine slammed a fist into her desk and winced before nodding slowly. We need the Republic for the time being, she agreed. If you're coming, you're getting in the best armor that fits you and you'll stay with your security detail at all times, sister of mine. Bo looked Satine in the eyes, then glanced at her belly. Keep them between you and any lightsaber-waving maniacs too. Leave the crazies to us. =RK equals. GAR HQ. Coruscant. Anakin could clearly feel how wary and distrustful the clones surrounding him were. The arrival of their backup didn't help matters, it simply added more sources of negative emotions around the Jedi. They were escorting him towards the small detention center in the bowels of the building, when the sergeant leading the almost platoon-sized procession faltered in his march, then cursed in unknown language. The NCO raised a hand in a halting gesture, making everyone stop, then turned around and stared at Anakin. Skywalker, whose side are you on? Can we trust you not to pull another, well, you moment like Geonosis or worse? The sergeant's gruff voice betrayed how he felt about that line of questioning just as strongly as his emotions. Yes, I mean no. I won't be criffing up like that ever again, Anakin stammered. This is bloody stupid. The sergeant grumbled. The chief of security has new orders. He paused. Generals Valentra and Kenobi are down for the count. Anakin blanched. He would have felt it if Obi-Wan was dead, right? However, with the Force feeling like a gathering storm light now, everything was concealed by the dark side and the Jedi couldn't really be sure about anything beyond his general vicinity. Apparently, Obi-Wan simply wasn't close enough. Is Obi-Wan all right? Anakin exclaimed. All we know is that he's down, wounded or worse. The sergeant shrugged. We're to go intercept Teen and his band of murderous bloody bastards and either subdue or slow them down until reinforcements can arrive in numbers. Can we count on you not to criff up or stab us in the back? The sergeant asked bluntly. Anakin winced. I'll do what I have to. I too have some pointed questions to ask Teen. Skywalker nodded. Like what, the criff? Was the Jedi Master in league with those nebulous-souled Republic people, besides Vale, Anakin had been hearing rumors about lately? What in the name of the Force was happening? You'd better. The sergeant muttered. Take point, we'll be right behind. Anakin rolled his eyes and nodded. Here, you might need this. The sergeant detached Skywalker's confiscated lightsaber and handed it back to the Jedi. Thanks, Anakin said after snatching it up. He was pretty sure he was able to keep the sneer out of his voice. Now, go. The sergeant pointed in the general direction of the closest elevator. =RK equals. Part 4. Chancellor Suite. Senate Building. Coruscant. Palpatine slowly stood up and made his way to the artifact-covered rafters to the left of his desk. The Jedi's head snapped in his direction when he let his mask slip almost fully and the dark side became a little vortex around him. Is it just me or did it really get cold around here? One of the clones asked quietly. Impossible. A Jedi exclaimed. What do you mean, Master Jedi? Palpatine asked in a cordial tone. If someone saw his face, they would have been disturbed by the hungry smile splitting it in two. Sidious laid a hand above the statue hiding his lightsaber. At that moment he could swear that the weapon actually felt as hungry for the bloodshed they both knew was coming as the Sith Lord himself. It was an illusion, of course, the lightsaber was a tool, no matter how useful. Yet, he could appreciate the sentiment that had to be coming from the dark side itself. It was high time the Sith got their vengeance. Palpatine schooled his face into an expression of confusion and turned sideways to look at the Jedi. The Knights had taken a step forward, placing themselves between him and the clones. The commander of the security detail was glancing between the Jedi and his charge, broadcasting his confusion for everyone to sense. He's a Sith. The oldest Knight, Sero or something, exclaimed and pointed an accusing finger at the Chancellor. Am I, now? Palpatine frowned. Even if you're right, what does it matter, Master Jedi? Thanks to General Vale, we all were reminded that being a Sith isn't a crime. We're living in a free republic. Palpatine granted a disapproving look to the younger man. What is this nonsense? The captain snapped. We're here to protect the Chancellor, nothing more, nothing else. He's a Sith. The only female Jedi in the room exclaimed.
I can feel the dark side all over him. She took a step back with disgust plainly visible on her face. Do I have something on my robes? Palpatine asked innocently, earning himself glares from the Jedi. He had to fight hard to keep his confused expression on his face. This trolling the Jedi thing Vale was doing was actually quite fun. It almost made him regret that they will be all dying soon. Almost. A metallic screech coming from the entrance got everyone's attention. Heads turned around and weapons were raised just in time to see the door open. To the Force adepts and at least a few clones, it was obvious that someone was using telekinesis to make an entrance. Halt! The captain ordered. Stand down, soldier. This is General Piel. We're here on Senate business. I can't grant you entry until the emergency is over, sir. Protecting the Chancellor is my only priority at the moment, the clone stated. That is no longer your concern. The small Jedi Master walked slowly through the door. He was followed by Kota and Windu. A group of Jedi Knights could be seen waiting outside. That's close enough, the captain snapped. What is the meaning of this, Master Piel? Palpatine put a confused frown on his face. Chancellor Palpatine, in the name of the Republic Senate, we're placing you under arrest for high treason. For engineering the Clone Wars, for creating and abetting sedition. What nonsense is this? Palpatine showed some anger and snapped at his accusers. We have proof, Kota announced. I seriously doubt that, otherwise you would have done this through the proper channels or at least presented it to the Senate in a full session. Palpatine snorted. The courts and Senate will decide that, Windu stated. Before or after you've taken control of them? Forgive me if I'm suddenly lost any trust that I used to have in the Jedi Order. Besides, aren't you supposed to be out on the front lines along with the commando unit? Where are those soldiers, Mr. Windu? Palpatine continued to play along. They're delayed. The former Jedi Master answered quietly. For Sidious it was plain to see that the man was lying. Is that so? Permanently I take it. Palpatine shook his head and put as much regret as he could in his voice. You come here to arrest me after killing or incapacitating the men meant to ensure you don't do something foolish. This is madness. Master Piel, Master Kota, I implore you, stop and think about what you're doing. We did that, Lord Sidious. You should have done the same before you decided to plunge the whole galaxy into a war for your personal gain. You will remain under Jedi custody while the Senate and the courts are able to review all the evidence and set up a trial date, Piel stated as if it was a fact. Really? I know what this is. Palpatine glared defiantly at the Jedi. You're afraid that your dogmatic religion is threatened. General Vale shook your order to the core when he revealed what he was. You couldn't conceive of someone calling himself a Sith not doing their best to see the galaxy burn and instead standing up in the Republic's hour of need and fighting to protect her. You curse and decry him for doing your duty better than most of you could, Palpatine exclaimed. That's rich coming from a Sith. A Jedi from the back row shouted. Your lies have no purchase, Sith. We know the truth. Piel glared back. It was you who misled Sifo Dyas. It was your kind who engineered the creation of the clone army, to ultimately use against the Republic once this sham of a war was over. It was you and your kind who began this murderous affair. I've served the Republic for decades. I did my best to avoid the horror of this war, because I saw what conflict did to my homeworld of Naboo. Once it became clear that a conflict might be inevitable, I did everything in my power to prepare us all. I used every scrap of ability I possessed, called every favor I've earned during my time as politician, made every promise and deal I could to prepare us so we could avoid what happened during the Naboo crisis. Palpatine glared at the Jedi. For anyone seeing a recording, it would appear that he was taken over by righteous anger over the charges leveled at him. He took a deep breath and continued. All that time I was forced to stay hidden. To never pay even a lip service to my own religion because I was afraid that this moment would come. You aren't here to protect the Republic, nor to do what is best for her. You're here out of fear. Because your dogma states that you must put me down like a rabid hound. Palpatine paused. We suspect nothing, Sith. We know, Windu said, and his hand fell on his lightsaber. Your own apprentice told us everything. That I'm a Sith who had to hide himself to avoid persecution? I freely admit it. Please tell me this isn't the reason for this whole war? I can feel who you have in the back. Count Dooku. Is he the source of your truth? Is this why most Jedi turned out to be useless commanders in the war? Were you always backing the Separatists in secret, or were they your creation? Dooku never truly left the Order, did he? Enough of these lies and deceptions, Piel snapped. You will stand down and be placed under arrest. I refuse. I believe that doing so would be a suicide. Palpatine smiled sadly. Then we'll take you in our custody using force. Windu countered. The Chancellor turned at the clones, who were covering the Jedi with their weapons. I'm truly sorry about this, Captain. You shouldn't be dragged in this religious dispute. Palpatine was the perfect picture of an old man racked with regret. There's nothing to be sorry about, sir. We're merely doing our duty. General Piel, General Kota, stand down. The captain ordered, even if it was obvious to everyone that it was a futile gesture. Thank you, Captain. Palpatine smiled. Stand aside, soldier. This does not concern you. Piel tried one last time. You're attempting to arrest the Chancellor on what appears to be false charges. I must respectfully disagree. Stand down. Try not to kill the clones. They merely do what they were taught to. Piel reached for his lightsaber. It's treason then, Palpatine sighed. A pulse of energy exploded from Sidious and turned off all recording devices. The statue he was still touching shattered and he grasped his lightsaber. Their finest hour. =RK=. Part 5. Chancellor's Suite. Senate Building. Coruscant. For a single heartbeat everyone stood still. Sidious laughed because he was free at last. He let his mask slip off and cackled like a madman. The dark side surged around him, an eager servant for its master. The Sith Lord drank deeply from the source of his power. He shuddered in delight as it flowed through his veins and made him feel like someone decades younger. Another heartbeat passed and Sidious directed the Force to enhance his raw strength and, more importantly, speed. The Sith was already moving and activating his lightsaber, when he released another energy pulse. A miasma made by the dark side itself splashed all over the Jedi, making them sluggish. It was only then that Sidious finally exploded into action. The closest Jedi Knight had just begun raising his lightsaber. The weapon wasn't even active yet, when Palpatine flew at the human like a bat escaping the 9 Corellian hells, stabbed him in the face and baked his brain. Jedi traitorous guard number 2 was next, the only woman in the group. She actually managed to switch on her saber, yet wasn't fast enough to parry a slash that bit deeply in her side. Yet the sudden pain paralyzed her for an instant, and that was enough for Sidious to throw her at the wall hard enough to shatter every bone in her body. The Sith Lord was upon the last of the knights in his security details, before anyone else could act. Lightsabers were ignited with the traditional snap hiss of burning air and the clones opened fire. That confrontation should have been over almost as soon as it began. All but a handful of shots were reflected back only to splash harmlessly over integrated shields. That state of affairs lasted mere moments, before Master Piel rolled under the barrage and was suddenly between the soldiers. One tried to shoot him, another actually came close to kicking the Jedi with his armored foot. None of them were fast enough. Piel raised his hands and all the clones were lifted off their feet and slammed into the ceiling with a dazzling force. Then again and again until the Jedi was sure they were all knocked out. That reassurance came from the Sith in the form of a lightning storm that engulfed the room and the Jedi busy getting in. All the masters and a handful of knights used their lightsabers to ground the attack and protect themselves. The rest and virtually all the clones were thrown against the walls by the onslaught. A few were actually unlucky to remain conscious for the few seconds it took to be fried by the attack. The storm was over as abruptly as it began and Sidious came on its heels. The Chancellor charged so fast he appeared to fly and another knight died before she could defend herself. Kota, who was nearby, went on the offensive, hoping to catch the Sith in the flank. His attack was parried and he was pushed back with a flurry of blows almost too fast for the eye to follow. Windu and Piel went to help their comrade, however before they could reach Sidious he called the weapon of a dead Jedi in his free hand and redoubled his attack. Kota held for a moment then jumped back out of range and it was almost too late. A distant part of Piel's mind heard his fellow Jedi scream. The Jedi Master saw him stagger back and grab his ruined face as he jumped towards the Sith. "Evacuate Master Kota," someone shouted, before Piel had no time to worry about anything but the monster he was engaging. They had to pin him in place for a few seconds and it would be all over. There were still a dozen Jedi Knights available to surround and swarm the Chancellor. Sidious had other ideas.
This was utterly and completely fun. His loud, joyful laughter and the disturbing grin he knew he had on his face were proof enough. Piel began jumping around, trying to imitate Yoda. Sidious snorted and froze the short Jedi at the height of a jump. He parried a stab coming from Windu. The former master was proving to be troublesome, and let go of his borrowed lightsaber. Sidious guided the green blade with his mind and sent it like a spear at a Jedi attempting to flank him. The Twi'lek attempted to deflect the blade, however his own lightsaber simply bounced from the hard telekinetic grip the Sith maintained. Sidious was glad he caught the alien's astounded expression as the weapon buried itself to the hilt in his chest and moved to ensure his organs were all destroyed. That brief distraction, no matter how fun, almost cost him everything. Windu went on the offensive, and with every passing moment the Jedi's strikes were coming faster, stronger, and a slash almost got him in the shoulder. Fortunately it left only a smoking gash in his robes as a parting gift. Yes, this was going to be a problem. Sidious's grin went as wide as it could. It's been a very long time since he faced a real challenge in combat, and even longer since he could allow himself to enjoy such a thing. The Chancellor took a step back, parried and deflected the next couple of attacks before locking blades with Windu. He let the Jedi slowly overpower him and used that brief time to snatch Piel form where he stood frozen and throw him at his opponent's back. Windu's eyes widened in surprise when he sensed what was happening. It was at that moment when Sidious left himself be overpowered, slid around the Jedi, ducked Piel's attempt to lob of his head and swirled around in one graceful motion that brought him in a perfect position to cut the Jedi Master in two, leaving the smoking pieces hit Windu. Sidious raised a hand and sent everything nearby at the former master, buying himself a few precious moments. While Windu was busy fending off the projectiles and processing the death of another Jedi, Sidious wasted no time and went on the attack against the knights swarming the room. The Sith Lord's next victim lasted 2 heartbeats, just long enough to parry the fist attack, to lose his sword hand the next moment and receive a lightsaber through the throat. Sidious used a prolonged lighting strike to move the corpse out of the way. He then proceeded to slam another Jedi with her dead and lighting-covered comrade, which was enough to take her out for the count. A Jedi Knight attempted to attack Sidious from the right, thought he was simply not fast enough. The Sith stepped past a swing and responded by impaling his attacker through the eye. That left only 2 more Jedi in the room besides Windu. Well, still alive at any rate. Sidious could see 2 more dragging a whimpering Kota out and thus blocking the door. So far so good. Sidious used the Force to throw his massive desk at Windu, who was approaching from behind, and followed with concentrating his full attention on one of the Jedi Knights. The Zabrak female glared defiantly as she settled into a Sorisu stance. Sidious smirked at her and used all his power to telekinetically twist her head around. She tried to counter him, however the woman simply lacked the raw power to do so. He felt satisfaction when her head finished turning completely around and saw the shocked expression on her face. Next thing Sidious knew was that he was ducking under a sweep from Windu, then he received a hit in the gut that sent him on his back. The other Jedi in the room used the opportunity to jump at him and tried to impale Palpatine. The Sith Lord snarled in sudden anger and caught his new assailant in a telekinetic grip. He pushed all the frustration he had been feeling for months in one single act. A loud popping sound was heard and the knight was squished like a soft drink can. Sidious threw the corpse at Windu, which barely bought him enough time to surge to his feet even with all the enhancements the Force was giving him. The Jedi glared at him. "You'll not win, Sith," Windu snapped and went on the attack. "I'm doing pretty well, don't you think, Master Windu?" Sidious shot back and laughed. Yes, this was it. A worthy opponent at last. Sidious pushed the Force to enhance his body to its limit and laughed in exhilaration when Windu was able to keep up swing for swing. =RK=. Part 6. Chancellor's Suite. Senate Building. Coruscant. Sidious' features morphed into an ugly snarl. His fun was about to be interrupted by the Jedi Knights, and were those armored Cathar of all people, rushing into his private office. Fighting Windu in a single combat was one thing. It was simply incredible fun to finally face off against someone who could keep up when the Sith Lord went all out. Getting interrupted, and possibly blindsided by a nobody, thus not only interrupting the fun, but potentially getting Palpatine wounded or worse, that simply wouldn't do. The Sith Lord parried a flurry of lightning-fast blows, riposted twice,
to no real effect and jumped back to place his back firmly towards the wall so he could avoid getting completely surrounded. Windu scowled at him, shook his head and waved his back up to flank Sidious. 5 more Jedi, 2 female humans, a Zabrak male, a Twi'lek female and a Rodian man approached cautiously, followed by half a dozen armored men carrying blaster rifles with a practiced tease. Windu pointed his purple blade at the Sith and Sidious answered with a small flourish of his saber. To tell the truth, the Sith Lord was getting a bit tired. It had been too long since he had the opportunity to train, even longer since he was in a proper battle. If it wasn't for the Force helping sustain his physical shape since the war began, not to mention using it to enhance his capabilities, Sidious knew he would have been exhausted by now. While the fight hadn't been going for more than a couple of minutes, the Sith Lord had been expending a great amount of energy to kill off as many of the Jedi as possible while keeping himself intact. If he was facing just Windu, Sidious would be content to keep fighting for as long as it took. However, there were a lot of Jedi and their minions outside and all it would take was for one of them to get lucky. Did you get enough friends, Master Windu? Or should we wait for a few more to come in? Sidious taunted. He hated ending his fun duel, however self-preservation took a precedence. Palpatine needed to buy time. The Sith Lord clawed at the dark side for even more power, wrenched as much energy as he could from it and unleashed it at his enemies. The Jedi raised their lightsabers to protect themselves from the lighting storm that manifested throughout the room. The soldiers stood their ground and opened fire only to see their shots be intercepted by forks of purple energy. Their surprise wasted just a moment before lighting blots picked them up from the floor and threw them across the room. Sidious laughed and sent a large wave of telekinetic force at the Jedi and used the distraction to sprint deeper within his suite. There was just a bedroom and small living room he could reach without going through the enemies, though that should be enough. Holding them off at the door would be much easier than facing multiple Jedi in the open. At the very least he would be spending less energy that way. The Sith had to dive through the door when the Force warned him of incoming danger. He moved a split second before a throw lightsaber slammed where his spine used to be. The ignited blade left a smoking hole in his shirt. However, it fortunately failed to bite into his back. Sidious got back on his feet and destroyed the lightsaber, then almost crippled him with a lightning bolt, before turning to block the door. The Sith grimaced when he saw that all 6 Jedi were still on their feet and more people were coming in behind them. Force-damned fools. He should have dealt with them earlier and damn the consequences. =RK=. Mace Windu glared at the Sith Lord. Sidious was smiling mockingly at him. The murderer had the gall to taunt Mace after cutting down more than a dozen Jedi, most of whom were his friends. This ends now, Sith, Windu declared. He let everything go. There was only the Force, the Va'apad, the Sith and his Shatterpoint. Sidious raised a hand and unleashed another wave of sickly-looking lighting. Mace caught the attack on his blade and walked through it. Part of the energy was absorbed by his lightsaber, some was radiated in the air around the Jedi, however most of it became a part of his own power when it was channeled through the Va'apad. The longer Mace fought the monster, the stronger he became. The Jedi was getting closer to discovering the Sith's Shatterpoint. He simply needed more time. Windu passed through the attack, which was cut off when he got in range of his enemy and went on the offensive. Every single one of the Jedi's actions were fueled by the dark side energy he stole from his opponent. Sidious might not be getting weaker, not yet, however Mace was getting stronger every time he locked blades with his opponent. Purple and red slammed into each other. The lightsaber's containment flashed furiously with each strike. The doorframe between them was soon cut apart and long glowing gorges were carved in the walls. Mace's attacks grew more and more furious. With every new swing, there was more power behind his blade. Then it finally happened. The Sith was forced to take a step back. Windu smiled grimly and took things even further. Jedi and Sith became dark blurs illuminated only by the half-melted walls around them and the glows of their weapons. They fought for long seconds on an even footing until Windu slammed Sidious's blade aside with enough force to leave the Chancellor open. The Jedi's fist soared forward surrounded by a visible sheath of telekinetic force and slammed it into the Sith's chest. Sidious was thrown clear off his feet, landed heavy into a couch, tumbled over it and spilled himself on the ground at the other end of the living room. Seeing an opportunity, Mace sprinted forward, determined to put an end to the madness. He barely cleared the entrance, when all the furniture jumped up and flew at him. Windu raised his hands and used the force thundering through his veins to halt the attack, before returning it at Sidious. The Sith retaliated with a thick torrent of lightning that turned everything into so much kindling that he sent soaring back at the Jedi. Mace spread his hands, letting his lightsaber fall to the ground and stop the shattered furniture. It floated between the combatants as they struggled to overpower each other. Mace pushed for all he was worth and slowly began nudging the debris toward the Sith. As Sidious drew more and more energy from the dark side, Windu was getting stronger as well until the balance was tilted in his favor. The Jedi roared and sent the debris hurling at the Sith. Sidious went down on his knees and formed a small dome that protected him from the raining pieces. Windu used the opportunity to call his lightsaber and charge the Sith. The Chancellor snarled at him and attempted to fry the Jedi once again. The incoming attack was so potent that it looked closer to a solid beam of dark energy instead of lightning bolts. Nevertheless, Mace was able to block it using his lightsaber and his Vapad. Windu had to take a step back, then another, before he was able to absorb enough energy to halt the assault and begin pushing through it. He was vaguely aware that Jedi Knights were cautiously entering the room and spreading out, preparing to jump at Sidious the moment the onslaught was over. If the Force was good, their help wouldn't be needed and Windu was going to be able to finally end the Sith. He could almost taste victory. Sidious was getting desperate, weaker. Mace allowed himself a small smirk. He was close to discovering the Sith's shatterpoint, though Sidious might not last that long as things were going. Windu took a step closer to the Chancellor. The dark side attack began harmlessly surrounding him, yet it was either deflected or absorbed by the Jedi, giving him more raw power to work with. The next step was easier to make, as Mace knew it would be. 4 more and he could cut down the monster.